Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're taking a look at Momentus Inc.
Momentus Inc.
That's right, Momentus Inc. They're aiming to be the FedEx of space,
I like.
delivering satellites, asteroid mining dreams, you name it, and we're diving into all of it.
Sounds ambitious.
Oh, it is. We've got articles, financial data, investor commentary, a whole stack of stuff.
Yeah, this should be a good one.
You really should. It seems like Momentus has captured both the amazing possibilities and the harsh realities we see out there in the space economy.
Absolutely. I mean, they've got a vision that's straight out of science fiction,
Right.
but they've also faced some pretty big challenges along the way.
You can say that again.
Yeah.
One article even calls them a potential disruptor, totally changing space infrastructure.
Interesting.
Then you see things like the SEC allegations and their stock price, which, let's just say, hasn't been doing so hot.
Yeah, that's definitely a cause for concern.
So yeah, we're going to explore those highs and lows of Momentus Inc. and see what we can learn from their journey.
I think a good place to start would be with their core business. This idea of providing low-cost, efficient transportation in space. They basically want to be the last-mile delivery for satellites.
I saw that in the Biz TV interview, and it really clicked for me there. They actually call it the hub and spoke model.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's almost like you can order a satellite online, and Momentus makes sure it gets delivered to the exact spot in orbit. Kind of like space-age pizza delivery.
Uh-huh. I like that analogy. That makes it much easier to grasp.
So they partner with those big launch companies like SpaceX for the trip to space. That's the hub part.
Right. Makes sense.
Then Momentus steps in and uses their own vehicles like little space tugs. They take the satellites to those precise final destinations, the spokes.
Okay, so they're essentially specializing in that final leg of the journey.
And get this, they're doing it all with water-based propellant.
Water.
You heard me right. Instead of the usual toxic rocket fuels, Momentus is using something as basic as water. Who would have thought you could power a spacecraft with something you drink every day?
That's pretty amazing. I mean, it's got to be better for the environment than all those chemicals.
Definitely. And, there's growing concern about space debris and pollution.
Absolutely. It's not just about getting to space anymore. It's about doing it responsibly.
Right. And it's not just the environmental angle. This water-based propellant could also be a lot cheaper than traditional fuels.
Now, that's a smart business move.
It seems like Momentus is banking on that cost-effectiveness to give them an edge in the market.
Makes perfect sense,
Yeah.
especially with so many companies jumping into the space game these days.
Exactly. It's a booming market right now. Everyone wants their own satellites. Governments, research groups, private companies, you name it.
It's like the Wild West out there.
And Momentus is setting themselves up to be right in the middle of all that action.
They're definitely in the right place at the right time.
I'd say so. The demand for those smaller, more specialized satellites is just skyrocketing.
And it shows no signs of slowing down.
Nope. Momentus is tapping into a trend that could completely reshape the entire space industry.
It's a bold move, but it could pay off big time.
Okay, so they've got this innovative tech, they're targeting a market that's exploding, and on top of that, they managed to get investments from some big names early on. We're talking Y Combinator, even Tony Robbins.
Wow, that's impressive. They must have had a very convincing pitch.
Sounds like they had the Midas touch there for a while.
There was definitely a lot of excitement surrounding them, especially when they decided to go public through a SPAC, a special purpose acquisition company.
Yeah, I was reading about that. It's like a fast track to the stock market, but it can also be risky for investors, right?
That's right. SPACs sometimes don't get the same level of scrutiny as a traditional IPO. It's like taking a shortcut, and sometimes shortcuts come with dangers.
One of the videos we have, the one from Unrivaled Investing, they highlight that lack of scrutiny as a potential red flag for investors.
It's definitely something to keep in mind as we dig deeper into Momentus's story.
For sure, because things aren't always as rosy as they may seem at first glance.
That's a good point. And I think that leads us perfectly into the next chapter of this deep dive.
Right. Let's lift the curtain a bit and see what's really going on behind those flashy projections and big promises.
Sounds good to me. You know, those financial projections we were just talking about, they were pretty wild.
Yeah, the John Paul investing video made it sound like Momentus was on the fast track to being a space giant.
Massive revenue growth, impressive margins. They even talked about asteroid and moon mining.
It does make you wonder, though, is it all a little too good to be true?
That's the key question, right? Those projections were definitely exciting.
Oh, yeah.
But they also raised some red flags. Can they actually pull this off? Especially since they rely so heavily on partners like SpaceX for the launches.
And then you've got the whole SEC investigation.
Yeah.
That definitely didn't help.
No, not at all. The SEC accused Momentus and their founder of straight-up misleading investors.
Seriously.
Yeah. They claimed their water propulsion system was tested in space and worked perfectly, when in reality it had failed.
Ouch. That's a pretty big deal.
And there was more. They also downplayed some potential issues with government licenses because of the founder's background.
So they weren't exactly being transparent.
Not really, and it makes you think how much of that early investor buzz was just hype, not careful research.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement, especially with something as cool as space exploration.
Absolutely. And that's why due diligence is so important, especially when you're dealing with a company in a brand new field like this.
Things can change so quickly, and those early predictions don't always match up with reality.
Exactly. Sometimes it's not all sunshine and rainbows, even when we're talking about space travel.
Speaking of things not going as planned, let's look at Momentus's stock performance.
Okay.
The data paints a pretty grim picture.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride for sure.
Soaring to over $1,300 a share in early 2021.
And now?
Now it's hovering around at 61 cents. That's a drop of over 95%.
Oof. What happened?
Well, the SEC investigation definitely played a role. It shook investor confidence big time.
Makes sense. People started questioning everything.
And then there were missed operational milestones. Momentus ever didn't deliver on some of their big promises.
They overpromised and underdelivered. Classic mistake.
Not a good look for a young company trying to prove itself.
And we can't forget about the competition. They're going up against some serious heavyweights in the space industry.
Like SpaceX and Blue Origin. It's tough to stand out when you're up against giants like that.
It's not just about having cool technology anymore. You need the resources and experience to compete at that level.
And on top of all that, Momentus hasn't been profitable. They've actually been reporting losses.
Which just adds fuel to the fire. Investors get nervous when they see red ink.
So where does all of this leave Momentus? Are they doomed, or can they turn things around?
It's a make-or-break moment for them. They still have that exciting vision and potentially game-changing technology.
Wow.
But they have a lot to prove. They need to secure more funding, actually deliver on their promises, and regain the trust of investors.
That's a tall order.
It is, but it's not impossible.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Let's dive into the technical side of things. What exactly makes Momentus's technology so special? What's the deal with this water-based propulsion system?
Their Vigoride transfer vehicle is at the heart of everything.
Vigoride.
Yeah, it's like a space tugboat designed to move satellites from their initial orbit to their final destination. And yes, it uses that water-based propulsion system we talked about.
The one the SEC said they lied about.
Right. So it might sound crazy, but it's actually based on some pretty basic physics. They heat up water to create superheated steam, and then that steam gets blasted out in a nozzle, creating thrust.
So it's like a giant space kettle.
Kind of. But the key is it's much more environmentally friendly than traditional chemical propellant.
It's essentially much cheaper too, right?
Exactly. But given the SEC allegations, we need to be careful about taking Momentus's word for it.
How do we know for sure that it actually works?
That's where independent testing comes in. We need to see if the technology has been validated by experts outside of Momentus.
Okay, so we need to look for evidence from reliable sources, not just marketing hype.
Right. It's all about separating fact from fiction. And speaking of big plans, Momentus has some pretty ambitious goals beyond just delivering satellites.
Oh yeah, like what?
In orbit servicing satellite as a service, they even talk about asteroid mining.
Wow, sounds like they want to build the whole infrastructure for doing business in space.
That's the long-term goal. But right now, they need to focus on proving their core technology, delivering on those early promises, and hitting their operational milestones.
They need to show they can walk before they can run.
Exactly. But those grand plans do raise some interesting questions about the future of the space economy.
Where does Momentus fit into all of this? With so much going on and so much competition.
Well, if they can actually pull it off, the potential is huge. The space economy is projected to be worth trillions of dollars in the next few decades.
Billions.
Yeah. And Momentus wants to be the key infrastructure provider, the company that makes it all possible.
So they want to be the picks and shovels of the space gold rush.
Precisely. They want to enable everyone else to strike it rich in this new frontier.
That's a pretty compelling vision.
It is. But as we've seen, the road to success is rarely smooth, especially in a field as unpredictable and challenging as space exploration.
So what should our listeners be watching for? What are the signs that Momentus is either on the right track or heading for disaster?
I'd say the most important thing is their financials. Can they get the funding they need to keep going? Can they start making money? Show they're on the path to profitability. Those are the big ones.
Cash is king, right? Especially for a young company with these huge goals.
Absolutely. They've got to show investors they can manage their money well and attract new investments. And remember, space is an expensive business.
So true. So what about their technology? Any progress on that water-based propulsion system? Are they hitting those operational milestones?
Those are key, too. They can't just talk a big game. They have to show that their tech actually works, that it's reliable and can be scaled up.
They need those successful satellite launches to build confidence and attract customers.
Absolutely. It's one thing to have a cool idea on paper. It's another to make it work in space.
And don't forget about the competition, SpaceX Blue Origin. These are big players with deep pockets. Can Momentus really carve out a space for themselves?
That's the challenge, isn't it? They need to find their niche, offer something unique and valuable. Maybe that focus on affordability will be their ticket.
But they have to deliver on those promises.
Consistency is key, especially when you're up against the big guys.
So Momentus is at crossroads. Huge potential, but some serious obstacles. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about investing?
Be careful. Do your homework. Don't just buy into the hype. Look beyond the marketing and really consider the risks.
Because space exploration is exciting, but it's still a gamble.
Exactly. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify and be prepared for a bumpy ride.
Sound advice. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into Momentus Inc.
It's been quite a journey, from those early dreams of revolutionizing space to the very real challenges they're facing now.
It really highlights how innovation isn't always a straight line to success.
It's often messy. There are setbacks and surprises along the way. But it's also inspiring to see companies pushing boundaries and reaching for the stars.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Momentus Inc.
And remember, the space industry is always changing. There are countless stories waiting to be told.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep looking up.